Hello everyone, welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host Paula Taylor and this is episode 137. Thank you so much to everyone who showed up to the open house this past weekend. We had a wonderful day. We had so many people come through. It was such a beautiful day, such a sense of community, which led directly into tonight's topic. We did some mini sound journeys. We gave away some prizes. It was just a really beautiful day. So thank you to those of you in town here who supported us by coming to that. We had a really beautiful day. And the morning of that class, I had actually done a selenite activation. That's the fourth layer of dimensional frequency expansion. And this topic of sisterhood came up and we were talking about it in class. And then it kind of expanded throughout the day into this event that we had. And so the first thing I want to say is I'm not calling this show sisterhood because I'm going to define sisterhood in a way that includes more than just people who present as female. Sisterhood is an ideal. Sisterhood is a way of being. So what I'm going to call tonight's episode is building non-competitive relationships. So the way this came up is we've talked about this a little bit before. We've never done a whole show on it. And this came up in the selenite activation class that I was doing this weekend. We were talking about how just about everybody I've ever worked with, a lot of us are practitioners or people who would like to be practitioners, people with quote unquote day jobs who practice on the side and want to launch full time into a healing business. There's a lot of that. And what I have encountered frequently in the people that I teach and relate with, and I've definitely had this experience, we'll talk about it a little bit, is this difficulty of building a business when we live in a society that is patriarchal. We'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that. When you are feeling called to this sisterhood. So let's talk first about what do I mean by sisterhood, because again, sisterhood is not just for women or people who present as female. Sisterhood is this idea of embodying the feminine principles of being in relationship, of being receptive, of listening, of holding space for each other, of being supportive, of letting go of this idea of scarcity where there's a pie and there's only so many pieces of the pie and you've got to struggle and fight for those pieces of the pie. That's what creates that competitiveness. And that is what I mean by patriarchy. That is this sort of toxic masculine model. It's not a balanced masculine model because you can have toxic masculinity, you can have toxic femininity. I don't really like the word toxic, but that's kind of what we go with in our society. So I will just use those terms to kind of go along with the crowd, let's say. Toxic masculinity, this over-the-top masculine energy, is this idea that there's only so much and that I've got to step on the backs of other people to make my way up. I've got to pull myself up by my bootstraps. There's only so much. You know, it's competition. It's this idea, like I said, there's a pie and there's only so many pieces of the pie. And if I let you have a piece, then my piece is going to be smaller. That is what I'm talking about in this situation when I'm referring to the patriarchy or toxic masculinity. Now, in contrast to that, sisterhood or balanced femininity is this idea that everyone gets ahead when we support each other. I used to have this bumper sticker that said, everyone does better when everyone does better. And people, they just did not get it. They were always like, I don't understand what that means. It's just words. So we're going to talk about that tonight. And I'm going to tell you, for a very, very long time, this is something that feels innate to me. This is something that I've felt from a fairly early age. And as someone who is neurodivergent, I now know that a lot of people who are neurodivergent, I can't talk tonight, specifically have these issues around justice and these issues around not understanding things like competition and things like stealing from other people and doing things in a dishonoring way, doing things without integrity. You hear me talk all the time about transparency and authenticity, and that's going to come into this topic as well. So sisterhood is this idea that everyone does better when everyone does better. There's not a pie with minute pieces. There's this supportive circle of people. And when you, from a networking standpoint, when you get in this circle, when you get in a non-competitive relationship, what you find out is that everyone is unique. We are meant to be unique. Everyone has unique skills. So I had all these people coming this weekend, and a lot of them were practitioners, and we all refer to each other because we all have skills that are unique to us, or we have a special connection with a certain client that maybe somebody else wouldn't develop for whatever reason. We have a common background. There's something there. And this idea of sisterhood, of this balanced feminine principle, is that as we support each other, as we hold each other up, we all do better. We all do better when we all do better. That's all that bumper sticker meant. Everyone does better when everyone does better. So it's not this idea that we're going to fight for this scarcity, this little pie that we're going to bake more pies. We're going to give our pies away, and we're going to do it in a way that is respectful. We're going to do it with integrity. We're going to do it with honor. We're going to let go of that competitive nature that feels like it's innate to us, but really is programmed. It's really a programmed effect. Happens in the family, happens in society. We've built our entire society around this idea. So for a very long time, I said I have always kind of struggled with this idea of competition. When I was raised in a very affluent suburb of Chicago, and I went to school with people who had a lot of money, many of them, some of them like us did not. And it was a very competitive atmosphere. It was one of those, it wasn't a prep school, but if you ever watched anything about a prep school, there's a lot of commonalities there. Who's going to get into Harvard? Who's going to get into Yale? That was the kind of environment I was raised in. And we're competing. We're always competing. We were always competing for everything. And it does create this very strong sense of scarcity in you. And it creates this sense that the only way you're going to be seen is to be better than someone else. And the example that kept coming to me when I was thinking about talking about this tonight was a music example, because, I use them very often. But I was thinking about, because from a very young age, I started playing in ensembles. And here's a really interesting thing about this. The idea of playing in an ensemble, whether it's a small ensemble, large ensemble, band, orchestra, whatever, singing in a choir, this is, by its very nature, created to be a relationship, created to be this idea of sisterhood where everyone does better when everyone does better. The better somebody plays, then the better someone else plays, and you can elevate each other in that way. But the way that we've set it up is completely competitive. And if you've ever been in this situation, you'll know what I'm talking about, and I'm going to use a professional example too. But there's this idea of what we call in school first chair, and later it's called principal. So I'm going to use the Chicago Symphony Orchestra as my example, just because that's where I grew up, and it's one of the most famous orchestras in the world. So in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, every section of the orchestra has what's called a principal. That is the first chair. That is the best player, essentially. That is the leader of the group. And as I was thinking about this, because this never really resonated with me, this whole idea of competing. So you want to be in this ensemble, and you want to be supportive, and you want to work together as a team. And I have been in situations where the music took over and elevated the situation in such a way that it felt like magic. That is what we're going for in ensemble. But the way that we have set up our ensembles is that everybody is also competing with each other. So you're expected to be in this collegial, in this relationship of support and listening to each other. Literally, I've got to listen. And am I playing too loud? Do I need to play louder? Am I out of tune? Is my pitch off? It's all about listening and communication and breathing together, even if you're in a wind ensemble or in a choir. And yet the undercurrent there is that only the best player is going to get the best parts, the solos, whether that's a choir, whether that's an orchestra, whether it's a band. And so we've created this situation that is completely what in psychology we would call it cognitive dissonance, that you're holding two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time. I want to be part of this ensemble. I want to elevate the group. I want to serve my team, essentially. And yet, if I play one wrong note, someone may challenge me for my principal role, for my first chair role. And that when I was even in junior high, we would have these challenges. And if you thought you could beat the person ahead of you, you would challenge them to a duel, to a music duel. And you'd each have to play for the band director under all this pressure. And then if you won the duel, you got to go to the next chair and you could work your way up in a section. I played clarinet, that's a big section. So if you start low down, you could work your way up. And I had a rival that she and I were first and second chair, and for years and years and years I was just trying to beat her because I wanted that recognition. I wanted to be the first chair. I wanted to get the solos. I wanted the acclaim that comes with that. But here's the thing, when I was thinking about this earlier today, I'm going to use the Chicago Symphony Orchestra again. I'm going to use the oboe section because that is what I ended up playing most professionally or through college. So generally, there's about 3 or 4 oboists in a professional orchestral section. And any one of those players could easily be the principal, could easily play those parts, could play those solos, could just knock them out of the park. And instead of doing something like a rotation where everybody gets to take their turn, it's competitive. And the situation it sets up is, again, we're trying to be in this relationship of give and take and support and creating this music and this magic together. But then there's somebody sitting right next to you who may be hoping for the worst for you because they want your seat. Hopefully I've never been in a professional orchestra, but I have been in many. There's also politics. This is supposed to be a meritocracy. Oh, if you're the best player, that doesn't always happen. I've experienced that personally. So when you think about that in terms of building a community, how do you build a community of support? How do you build a loving community? How do you build and make magic together when there's this undercurrent of competition all of the time, and someone's just waiting for you to make a mistake. Someone's just waiting for their piece of the pie because there's only this one piece to be the principal player, and I want that piece so badly. It just does not make any sense, and it never resonated with me. It always felt really gross and kind of dirty, this whole idea of competition. And again, I don't think that you can really create a loving community when there is competition. And that's what we're focusing on tonight. There's other aspects of this kind of patriarchal system, but we're going to focus on this idea of competition because it is so rampant in our society. I used music as an example. Think about sports. Almost everybody I know played some sort of sport as a kid, youth soccer, baseball, whatever, football. From a very early age, right away, you are competing. You're competing against the other team. You're competing to be the best one on your team. You're competing for a specific position. I remember when they started giving out participation trophies to people and everybody was all mad. Oh, in my day, we never had a participation trophy. You got to win. If you're not a winner, you're a loser. Like all of that kind of stuff is so pervasive in our culture. How are we supposed to build a community of love and support when underneath it there is this undercurrent of competition? And the answer is that we can't. And I spent years of my life trying to get into community with people and then encountering that undercurrent. And again, as someone who is neurodivergent, I have learned this is a very common trait of people who have neurodivergence. Again, a strong sense of justice and a strong sense of sort of sometimes seeing like a bigger picture than other people do. And so like I remember I worked at a place and as a massage therapist and this person kept stealing my clients. And even at the time I thought they must really need those clients way more than I do. And I just kind of stepped out of the way. But I also didn't stay there because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to be treated with disrespect or to be treated in a way that is when the other person's not acting with integrity, especially when you're really trying to hold your integrity and trying to be ethical and authentic and transparent and all the kind of words that I tend to use for that sort of thing. So I kept joining community, or I'd have an experience and then like something would happen and I'd kind of leave, and I ended up in hermit mode for a long time, which I've talked about. And then in 2019, I ended up in this women's group called Heart to Heart Sisters, which I've mentioned before on the show. And it was led at the time by a woman named Sarah Amos, who I've probably also mentioned on the show. And, ooh, it's going to make me emotional. It's the first place where I really saw this feeling of sisterhood demonstrated in a really real way. And nobody's perfect. No group is perfect. No, people aren't perfect. And that is the thing that I wanted to kind of stress with this topic. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about my experience in that group. But we make mistakes. We get triggered. We have trauma. I was talking to somebody this week who works with children who have developmental trauma, meaning trauma in childhood. And she said something that I said, I'm going to have to sit with that, because the way she said it was one of those things that like I'd never thought about in exactly that way. And I think that really gets to the kind of crux of what I'm trying to talk about here. So what she said, what we teach children is, I have a me space and you have a you space and we have a we space. And when you have experienced trauma, especially developmental trauma, so trauma in childhood, the we space is off. It is turbulent. It is uncomfortable. And all of a sudden it was like my head kind of exploded, and I said to her, I'm really going to have to sit with that. I'm going to have to think about that. And when I was thinking about this topic, no wonder we have such a hard time building community, because most of us have trauma, and a lot of us have untreated trauma, have unrecognized trauma. We have not done any work on our trauma. And no matter how much work you've done on your trauma, we just talked about that last week, you still get triggered. We talk about that all the time. No one is ever going to be perfect. So what is the difference in building a sisterhood, in building this heart-centered community, in building a space of true support and true unconditionality? And that is one of the things I started to learn in that space of sisterhood. And I'm going to share a story that somebody told me who had been in that space for a long time. And what she said to me one time, or we were kind of in a group, but she said, I get triggered really easily. I have a lot of trauma. I know that. She said, I know that I'm a difficult person. And every other group I've ever been in, I've been asked to leave when I've had one of these kind of outbursts or when I get triggered. And Sarah's never done that to me. Now, Sarah calls me out on my BS, she said. She doesn't let me get away with it. She points it out to me. But then she holds the space for me to get through it, and she welcomes me back in when I'm ready. And I think that is the secret to building this sisterhood, is this idea. One time Sarah said to me, I won't support weakness. I support strength. And it was another one of those things that I was like, I'm really going to have to think about that. Like, what does that mean? And I think I finally, after several years of working and starting to build my own community, I kind of understand what she was talking about. So building a safe, inclusive, heart-centered sisterhood, a community of support and unconditionality and safety, and this balanced masculine and feminine energy, because the toxic feminine energy comes out in a lot of the situations I've been in, where, again, there's this undercurrent of, there's this backstabbing, there's this gossip, there's this talking behind each other's backs. It's the Mean Girls phenomenon. That's kind of, never seen Mean Girls, watch it. That is toxic femininity in a very funny way. And, but it's a good depiction of that idea. And I think all I need to do is say Mean Girls and gossip and backstabbing, and that's the toxic feminine. That's what happens when the feminine's not balanced. When the masculine isn't balanced, we have everything I've just talked about: competition, scarcity, this feeling of there not being enough and we've got to fight for a piece of something. I've got to push my way through that pushing. I have talked before, I do not respond well to being pushed. And, that to me, that's a very masculine, whereas the feminine is that receptivity. I allow people to come to me. I create energy that draws people to me because I am this beacon of light and love and authenticity and transparency. So back to this story I was telling, how do we hold this space? And it is through transparency and authenticity. Several months ago, I think this was like December, January, a long time ago, I was doing a class with what I call my OGs, my original goddesses. We were doing, I think it was the Celestite activation of dimensional frequency expansion. Interestingly, I think it was, because that's where we start stepping outside of the ego. And I said to everyone in the class, everyone was talking about how they were doing, and I was in a place where I felt like I was struggling a little bit, and I was feeling like things weren't coming easily to me, and you know, that happens. Again, we talk all the time. Things go up and down. So I was kind of in a down. And one of the OGs, my original goddesses, was, oh my gosh, all this information's coming in, and like things are so wonderful, and I have all these ideas. And I got triggered by that. That scarcity kind of started coming up, and I thought, oh no, like she's got all this stuff, and look at how wonderful things are for her. And like right away I knew I was triggered, because I knew that underneath the trigger I was thrilled, because that is what we want for each other in this community. But I ended up telling them that I was triggered, because that is part of this transparency and this authenticity. Because one of the things that happens in some of the communities that I've been in, or some of the relationships that I've seen, is what I call we're using toxic a lot tonight, but toxic positivity. Everything's fine. Everything's okay. Everything's great. We're not going to look under the surface and really talk about, we're not going to delve deep and really get into what's actually happening. We're just going to say everything's light and love and everything's great. And that is almost more dangerous, I think, than this sort of patriarchal model of pushing in competition. Because there's a level of truth to that is lacking in that situation where everything's just all hunky-dory all the time. So as an example, as you know, I've got to hold myself to my own standards. So I said, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm feeling triggered about this. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me. I just need to work through it. But I want to be honest with you, because if you feel anything coming from me that doesn't feel like that light and love and support and joy in your joy, I want you to know that I know it's not about you. It's about me. And once I work through this, then I will be able to get to the place where I am celebrating your success. But trying to pretend you're in a place that you're not does not actually serve. And it's not real relationship. It's not real community if we're just floating along on the surface pretending that everything's fine. So how do we create non-competitive relationships? It's hard, because you got to be honest, and you've got to be vulnerable, and you've got to say, I am feeling a lot of scarcity right now, or I am feeling triggered by this, or I am feeling threatened by this. And that is one of the hardest things to do, because it is so vulnerable, because it feels a little bit like, you know, if you're in that patriarchal model, you're not supposed to show any weakness, because that is when they're going to pounce and get you in the jugular. That's when they're going to, you know, the predator is going to grab your throat and tear out your throat, right? That is the model, and that is how the body reacts to this too. So that's another important point about this, is that we cannot build this kind of relationship when our bodies are not safe, when our bodies do not feel safe. And I think that's why it took me so long to start building my own community. I was going in and out of communities and feeling frequently attacked. And that's a strong word, but that is psychically and emotionally how it feels when someone is triggered. It feels like an attack. And if they're not going to acknowledge it, and if you can't acknowledge it, and there's no actual authenticity or depth to the relationship, then that is when we're in that sort of toxic thing where somebody like me, I just can't stay. I just can't stay in that situation for very long, because it doesn't align. It doesn't feel in alignment with who I want to be. So for a long time, I was like, well, I'll just be by myself. And then eventually, as I started to develop my strength and work through claiming my light and letting my light shine, it was like, now it's time for me to build this relationship with others. And that leads me to this weekend in this class. We were talking about these things in this selenite activation this weekend. And then we had this open house, and it was such a beautiful experience of people coming together and coming in and exchanging, cards and getting excited about the work. And it just, it kind of took my breath away. I have to say, the feeling of seeing people in community, the knowingness that when we create this energy, when we create these communities with intention, we did a whole show on intentional community building a little while ago. It takes intention, and it takes, excuse me, got into my throat right there, right when I was just about to say, it takes integrity, and it takes vulnerability, living in the throat, authenticity, transparency. And that is really hard. And when you have been raised like so many of us, even if it's not in your family, we're talking about the me space, the you space, the me space, and the we space, right? The we space of our culture is unsafe. It's just how we've created it to be, with all the competition, with the cutthroat attitudes that people have, with this idea that I've got to get my piece, I've got to survive, scrabbling to survive. It is no wonder that we have a hard time, first of all, feeling safe, and second of all, creating safety in our relationships, in our communities. And so I'm going to keep working on that, and I hope you will join me. If you're here, you must be interested. I have my Patreon community. There's still just a few of us, but my intention is to build this community beyond the physical, beyond the center that I just opened. That is now we did this selenite activation, and this beautiful cathedral of light came into that space. And the way the energy moves in there is just so beautiful. And it is set up for this support. It is set up for this transition out of that toxicity of our feminine and masculine and into the balance. Sisterhood is really a balance. And if you think about what we could really do if we came together, and I'm not talking about just women, I'm talking about everybody, but if it's got to start with the women, a lot of times it seems like that's where we're starting. So if that's where we start, that's where we start. And the way we start is by letting go of that competitiveness. When you see someone on social media and they're doing well, and you feel that little bit of envy or that jealousy, look at it, acknowledge it, do the scarcity work, do the trauma work that it takes to recognize that someone else doing well does not take anything away from you. It's just like the argument about gay and straight marriage, which we're fighting all over again for whatever reason, because we can't learn our lesson. Somebody else getting married, whoever it is, does not take away from your marriage. And in fact, the more love there is in the world, the more we build. That is a perfect example of this. As we help each other, as we hold each other up, as we support each other, we rise together and we make a new society. And it's got to start somewhere. So join my Patreon. It's Paula Taylor Energy. Come into the center. I'm going to be doing my 4th Tuesday Sacred Sound Journeys. We're going to be doing a once a month practitioner meetup for I'm going to call it mastermind support, kind of give and take, helping each other out. We're going to be doing group sound practice. There's a lot of things coming into that space and beyond, into the virtual, because one of the amazing things about technology, with all of its shortcomings and things that actually make our lives more difficult, we can connect in a way we never were able to before if we use it in a way that is connecting, if we use it in a way that builds, if we use it intentionally. And every week on this show, we do a guided meditation, a healing session where we look at trauma, we release trauma, we build that stamina in ourselves to start holding space for that authenticity and that transparency. And it's so hard. It's so vulnerable, but it's the only way that we're really going to make a change. And we do it together. And yeah, I think that's what I have to say about that. So what are we doing for tonight's meditation? I don't know. That's a good question. I had some things in mind. I think we'll just get into it and see where we go. We may go a little bit into exploring this within yourself, because that is one of the reasons I always say, if you change yourself, you change the world. When you change your vibration, that ripples out and it affects everyone around you. And so if we can recognize the places in ourselves where we're still holding those beliefs, those limiting beliefs, the scarcity beliefs, the jealousy, the envy, the feeling of competitiveness, we're not going to change it overnight. But the first step is awareness, right? Recognizing, getting out of that denial, which really is what toxic positivity is. Oh, everything's fine. There's nothing here. There's something. I guarantee you, everybody on earth has gotten triggered around this. Around being competitive, around feeling scarcity, around self-worth is a huge part of this. If you don't feel like you're worthy of being treated well, then how can you expect to be treated well? So there's that kind of a thing. You can hope that everyone else treats you the way that you hope to be treated, the golden rule. But until we do that inner work, it's really hard to get there. And it's something that we have to just continually practice. It's something that we have to continually practice. So we're going to practice something that supports that tonight. Whatever gets channeled in is what we're doing. So let's meditate together. So for this meditation, find a comfortable position. You can sit up, you can lie down. Just get into a position that feels safe and supported. We are going to get into some limiting beliefs, some sort of possibly trauma triggers here tonight. So start out by allowing some safety in your body. Find a good, comfortable position. Take 3 to 5 deep oxytocin breaths and give your body the signal that it's safe, that it's supported. Breathing in through the nose, letting the belly float out strongly. Sighing that breath out with an audible ha sound. That vibrates the vagus nerve. It tells us that we're safe. It tells us that we can relax. So let's do that together. And then do that 3 to 5 more times, maybe introducing a little movement. As soon as I did my first one, I felt a little bit of tightness in the front of my throat. And I was being called to move my neck. Just be really gentle with this. We don't want any intense movements, because that tells the body once again that it's not safe, and we are introducing some safety. So if you're doing any movement, do small movements. Do things that feel good. Don't push yourself right now. And let's take one more of those big, beautiful oxytocin breaths together. Building relationship with others depends on us having a good and comfortable and safe relationship with ourselves. That means being embodied, being physically present in the body. That means recognizing those limiting beliefs, those fears that are floating around in the mental space, and being willing to look at them and being willing to release them, and recognizing that we'll probably have to do that over and over again, and that that's okay. And of course, being expanded, bringing clarity to the mental space, bringing harmony to the body by being embodied, and then bringing that expansion to our field. When we fill ourselves up with unconditional love, all other energy that comes into our space gets transmuted into that unconditional love, or it chooses not to come into our space. And that's why sometimes old relationships, old situations, even jobs will fall away as we begin to do this work, because we're changing our vibration, we're expanding our vibration, we're bringing more love into our field, and that attracts more love into our field. And those vibrations that aren't loving tend to just begin to fall away. But again, this takes practice, it takes intention, it takes repetition. So let's first come fully into the body. Let's allow that crown chakra, the top of the head, to open, and invite in that unconditional love, that beautiful golden light to flow into the top of your head. Let it come into the brain, and let it come into the space around your head where a lot of those beliefs are floating. Let it come into your face and your jaw, your neck and your throat. Let this beautiful golden light of unconditional love flow into your chest and out into your shoulders. Let it flow down your arms, all the way down through the elbows, down through the forearms and the wrists, all the way into the hands. Fill your arms and hands up with unconditional love and light now. Let that beautiful love and light flow into the chest and the upper back. Taking an extra breath or two in the heart space here, loosening up some of those fears that might be living in the heart space. Fears of scarcity, fears about worth, fears about survival and support. Let that beautiful love and light just carry anything that's no longer needed down through the belly and the mid back, down through the pelvis and the low back. And again, maybe take a couple extra breaths here. A lot of this fearful vibration can get stored in the hips, in the sacrum and the pelvis. So collecting anything that's no longer serving, and then letting this love just carry it down through the thighs, into the knees. And again, taking an extra breath or two here. Lots of support fears can get trapped in the knees. And then sending anything that's not serving down through the lower legs, through the ankles and feet, down into the earth to be recycled for the highest good. When you release with intention and with love, even if the energy feels fearful or negative to you, the earth knows what to do with that. When we do this intentionally, when we do this gently, we just let go of what's not serving us so that it can be used elsewhere where it will serve or transformed as needed. So trust this beautiful earth to do that for you. Let yourself be supported first by this physical planet that we're on. Feel your feet on the ground, or if you're sitting, feel your bottom. If you're lying down, feel your entire back body connected to the earth, connected to the ground. Begin to relax into that support. Very loving support here. And then bringing awareness to the head again, especially in the area around the head, that mental space. Just clearing away any of those beliefs around scarcity, around competition, comparing yourself to someone else. Letting those clear, even if it's just for the next few moments here. For this practice, you can come back to this, and eventually you'll build a new habit. You'll build a new neural pathway where you don't compare anymore, where you let go of that competition, where we start to truly celebrate each other's successes. When we know we are supported and provided for, there is no need for competition because we are in a flow. We will receive. We are in abundance. And everyone can be in this flow. There is no limit to this energy. This is source energy. This is unconditional love and light. This is ki or chi or prana. This is God energy. There is no limit. It is by definition limitless. So as we draw this in and we expand, we step into a flow of abundance that eliminates the need for competition, that eliminates the need for comparison. Coming to the belly now, maybe even put your hands on the belly. You can rub your belly a little bit, one way, the other way, both ways. Waking this area up. We tend to be really disconnected from the belly. And there's a lot of fear stored here in the belly as well. So just gently doing a little bit of self-massage. You can go clockwise. That actually helps with the movement of bowel through your system. You can kind of rub back and forth or up and down, just waking this up, dislodging any of those fears, any of that feeling of a need for competition or comparison. And as you're ready, then you can still your hands. You can keep massaging a little bit, whatever feels good. But just notice that little short self-massage. Perhaps heated up your hands, drawing that beautiful energy down through your hands, that universal life force energy, that Reiki. Perhaps you feel something in your belly. Perhaps you're just noticing that your belly feels kind of stuck, or you can't feel anything in your belly. That's okay. Awareness is the first step to transformation. So just setting the intention here that you'd like to send some love and light into that belly, especially if you are a woman. We are raised to pull our bellies in. Men too. So let your belly relax here. No one's watching you and no one's judging you. No one ever judges you as harshly as you judge yourself mostly. So letting go of the self-judgment is a way to let go of the reflections that we see when other people are judging us. That's a reflection of our own self-judgments. So just sending some love and light into the belly here. Oh, kachatakanaye te o shatakanaye. Hu se shalanatakaye. Sending that love and light into the belly here. Allow yourself to receive it. Know that you are worthy to receive this beautiful movement into your belly. And then once more, just think about drawing that energy down through your hips and your pelvis, down to your knees. You can even do a little bit of massage there. Really coming fully into the body here. And then as you feel ready, beginning to explore just gently that area around the body. Just outside of the body, we call that the etheric body, just 1 to 3 inches. Notice how that feels. If you don't feel anything, that's fine. Just setting an intention to allow some flow there. It tends to get really restricted, especially when we're fearful. So asking for a little bit of a pulse of energy here in that etheric body. And you can stay with this, or if you feel comfortable, you can move further out into that aura, the auric body, further out from the body. Maybe a few feet, maybe multiple feet. Just checking in. Bringing your hands slowly through this area can help you find any areas of tension or tightness, just like you might notice in your body. You might feel a hot spot or a cold spot. You might notice that your hands kind of stop or slow down. So if you find anything in the field there, just send some love to it. Send some intention to release anything that no longer serves, to draw in love and light in its place. And then come still as you're ready. We're going to do just a little bit of mental exploration here. So for this, just let this, whatever comes to you, whatever the first scenario that comes into your mind, go with that. Unless something comes in that feels bigger, you can repeat this. And at any point, if this feels like it's too much, just go back to this kind of scanning through the body or in the fields around the body, doing that direct energy work. If you're not feeling like you're ready to be in this trauma release portion tonight, that's completely fine. Call to your mind a scenario in which you felt hurt by competition or comparison. Maybe somebody else compared you to one of your friends or family members and it was painful. Maybe it was an authority figure like a parent or a teacher comparing you to someone else. Maybe it was internal and you felt a strong desire to compete with someone, to prove that you were the best. Just find that scenario and notice right away that it feels really uncomfortable. There's a change in the way your body feels. There's a tightening maybe in the belly. There's a constriction of this beautiful energy that we just moved out. Just thinking about that, it brings up this discomfort. And our first impulse oftentimes is to run from the discomfort, but know that we're going to work through it and let it stay for a moment. And maybe you hold this scenario in your hands. Or maybe you're just doing this exercise in your mind. That's fine. You don't have to see anything. We're using intention here. Send love into this situation. I'm not trying to change the outcome. This is something that already happened. But notice what happens if you just send love to that situation. Because chances are the other person in the situation was also hurt by this, even if it seemed like they were the person who came out on top. The pressure of maintaining that status is enormous. Or maybe you were the person on top and you recognize that you weren't all that nice to the people you were competing with. So just sending some beautiful love and light, sending some forgiveness here to yourself, to the other person or people, if that's available to you. If not, that's fine. Again, you can come back and repeat this. And as you're sending this love into this situation, notice if there's a shift in your body, a loosening in your chest or your belly, a loosening of the knots in your shoulders or neck, a feeling of expansion. And just keep sending love until you start noticing a shift. And if you don't notice one, that's okay. This may require more practice. This may require more healing, this situation. So continue to send some love to this situation, or if you feel like you've worked through it, if it feels resolved, you can go back to scanning and expanding your fields, loosening your heart center, letting go of fear in the mental field or coming fully into your body. Whatever's calling to you here, we're going to step into a little bit of sound, just sending beautiful love and light and this understanding that everyone does better when everyone does better. Together we rise. Ooh. Seya sasheo tekana. Uwe se shana. Uwe se shana. Letting go whatever you were working on here, coming still, just allowing yourself to receive for the last few moments here. Beautiful flow of energy coming through this transmission, sending you love, sending you light. Letting go of that programmed belief that we must compete to succeed, that we must compare ourselves to each other, that we must compete for scarce resources. None of that is true. Energy is limitless, and everything is energy. So just give yourself a moment to call in this energy, widening your field as much as feels good. Letting it come fully through the body, feeling your feet on the ground, feeling your bottom on the ground, or your back, whatever part of you is closest to or touching the ground. Feeling that openness of your heart, of your throat, allowing yourself to be vulnerable and knowing that you are supported and safe. The truth of your identity is that you are a limitless being of light and love, and that everyone around you has access to that same light and love. There is so much. It is limitless. There is no need to compete for that. It is what we are made of. It is part of every cell in our body. As you feel ready, you can begin to slowly move your feet, maybe wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, circle your wrists and ankles. Move your head and neck around slowly if that feels good. Maybe do a little bit of very small movement, very small stretches, just to come back to the room, come back to the rest of your day or evening. And as you're ready, affirm with me out loud if possible. I am fully present in my body. I am fully present in my body, and I know there is always enough. I am fully present in my body, and I release my need to compete with anyone else. I am supported. Take one or two more deep breaths in any way that you'd like. as you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I may not have a live show next week. If not, I will see you in 2 weeks. Have an expanded rest of your evening and a competition-free rest of your week. And I will see you on the next episode of Wind Down Wednesdays.